Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're embarking on a really incredible journey, I think. We're looking at the nervous system.
Yeah, the body's most complex, most vital system. And our mission today, it's a bit special.
Right.
We want to equip you, our listener, especially if you're maybe a first-year medical student, with such a clear picture of these lectures that you could honestly turn around and explain it all to maybe a curious 10-year-old.
Yeah, like building those memory anchors, those metaphors you need to make it stick. Sort of a shortcut to really getting these core ideas.
Exactly. It's not just the what, but the why and the how it all connects. So imagine your body, right, like a bustling city.
Okay, I like that. A city?
And the nervous system, that's the entire communication grid, the control centers, the sensors, the delivery drivers, everything.
Okay, let's map out this city then. Where do we start? Our sources mention two main anatomical divisions, like headquarters and the field agents.
Yeah, precisely. You've got the central nervous system, the CNS. That's your brain and spinal cord. Think of it as the main command center, the absolute headquarters, and the major data highway.
Got it, HQ.
And then branching out from there, everywhere else, that's the peripheral nervous system, the PNS, all the nerves going to your limbs, your organs.
All the field agents.
Exactly. Field agents, sensors reporting back, delivery drivers carrying out orders. Plus you have ganglia, sort of like little relay stations, and nerve terminals, the endpoints.
Okay. And functionally, it feels like, well, some things I choose to do, like waving my hand, and other things just happen. My heart beats, I digest food. How's that split work?
Ah, good question. That's within the PNS. It splits functionally. First, the somatic nervous system. That's largely your voluntary control system.
Like deciding to kick a ball.
Exactly. You decide. It happens. It controls your skeletal muscles. Think of it as you consciously driving your car.
Okay.
Then there's the autonomic nervous system, the ANS. That's the automatic pilot. It handles all the internal stuff you don't consciously manage.
Heart rate, breathing, digestion.
Right. Sweating, blood pressure, all that background regulation to keep your internal environment stable. It's like the car's automatic systems, engine management, climate control, running without you thinking about it.
And this automatic pilot, the ANS, it gets even more interesting, doesn't it? It's not just one thing. It's like two sides constantly balancing.
Absolutely. It's a constant balancing act. You have the sympathetic nervous system, the SNS. That's your fight or flight system.
It's the accelerator.
Pretty much. It revs things up in stressful situations, emergencies, excitement, gets you ready for action.
And the other side.
That's the parasympathetic nervous system, the PNS, often called rest and digest. It does the opposite, calms things down, conserves energy.
So the brake pedal.
Exactly. Accelerator and brake. They're almost always both active to some degree, creating what we call autonomic tone. This constant adjustment keeps your body in homeostasis, that stable internal state. It's a really dynamic balance.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, thinking about the CNS, the brain and spinal cord, that command center must be incredibly well protected, right?
Oh, absolutely. Essential infrastructure needs top security. First, you have the hard armor.
The skull for the brain, the vertebrae for the spinal cord.
Right, the bony protection. But there's much more layered underneath.
Which brings us to the meninges. These sound important, but maybe a bit complex. If I had to explain these protective layers to that 10-year-old.
Okay, imagine wrapping a super fragile, incredibly valuable gift. You wouldn't just use one layer of thin paper, would you?
No way. Bubble wrap, sturdy box.
Right. The meninges are like three distinct, specialized layers of wrapping for the brain and spinal cord. The outermost one is super tough, the dura mater, Latin for hard mother.
Okay, tough outer shell.
Then inside that, you have the arachnoid mater. It's called spider-like because it has these webby connections. It's more elastic.
Spiderweb layer. Got it.
And the innermost layer, the one that clings right to the surface of the brain and spinal cord, following every little groove, that's the pia mater, tender mother. Very delicate.
Hard, webby, tender.
Okay. Now, what's really crucial is the space between the arachnoid and the pia, the subarachnoid space.
Ah, okay. What's in there?
It's filled with fluid, which we'll get to, but also blood vessels travel through this space. And here's the catch. They're not super well supported there.
Seems like a vulnerability.
It can be.
Yeah.
If one of those vessels gets damaged, maybe from a head injury or an aneurysm bursting, you can get bleeding into that space, a subarachnoid hemorrhage.
And that would put pressure on the brain.
Exactly. Dangerous pressure within that confined skull space. So the protection itself creates potential risks if breached.
Right. Okay, you mentioned fluid in that space. The cerebrospinal fluid, CSF, what's its role? Just cushioning.
It's way more than just cushioning, although that's vital. It fills the brain's inner chambers, the ventricles, the spinal cords, central canal, and that subarachnoid space. Think of it like the brain's personal bathwater, constantly circulating and getting refreshed about 4 times a day.
Wow. So what does it do?
Well, it nourishes the brain tissue, delivers essential stuff, and importantly, it removes waste products, like a specialized circulatory system just for the CNS.
Okay.
And yes, the physical protection is huge. It makes the brain buoyant, effectively reducing its felt weight by like 97%. So it floats, cushioning it against bumps and jolts.
Amazing. And where does it come from?
It's made by specialized cells called ependymal cells, which line those ventricles, particularly in structures called the choroid plexuses.
Okay. So bone, meninges, CSF, anything else protecting the command center?
One more critical layer of security, the blood-brain barrier, the BBB.
The ultimate checkpoint. How does that work?
It's all about the blood vessels, the capillaries that supply the brain and spinal cord. Unlike capillaries elsewhere in your body, the cells forming these vessel walls are joined by incredibly tight junctions.
So they're not leaky.
Much, much less leaky.
Yeah.
It creates a highly selective barrier that tightly controls what substances can actually get from the bloodstream into the delicate nervous tissue, like a very strict bouncer at a VIP club.
Protecting it from toxins, pathogens.
Exactly. But it also means it can be hard to get medications into the brain when needed. It's a double-edged sword, that barrier.
Okay, defense is covered. Now let's zoom in. The actual workers, the messengers, neurons.
Right, the functional units. These are the cells actually transmitting the information, specialized like crazy. Typically, each neuron has 3 main parts.
Go on.
First, the cell body, sometimes called the soma or perikaryon, that's the neuron's factory, contains the nucleus, all the machinery. It's packed with something called missile substance. Basically, lots of protein-making equipment, rough ER.
The fact.
Then, branching off the cell body, you have dendrites. Think of these as the neuron's antenna or receivers. They collect signals from other neurons, often look like complex tree branches.
Receiving signals.
And then usually a single long projection extending away from the cell body, that's the axon, the transmitter wire. It sends the nerve impulse onwards to the next cell.
Sending the signal.
And at the very end, the axon splits into branches, the terminal arborizations ending in little swellings called terminal boutons. These are the delivery docks where the message gets passed on.
Cell body, dendrites receive, axon sends via terminal boutons.
Got it. So are all these neuron messengers the same? Or different types?
Oh, definitely different types. We can classify them by what they do, their function, and how they're built, their structure.
Okay, functionally first.
Functionally. Sensory neurons, or afferent fibers, they're the reporters. They transmit information towards the CNS from your skin, eyes, ears, internal organs.
Bringing news to HQ. Exactly. Then motor neurons, or efferent fibers, they're the commanders. They carry signals away from the CNS to make things happen, telling muscles to contract, glands to secrete. These are often pretty big neurons.
Sending out the orders.
Right. And then there are the interneurons. These are the vast majority, like 95% or more. They live entirely within the CNS, connecting sensory and motor pathways. They're the processors, the decision makers, the thinkers.
Wow, 95%. So most neurons are just talking to other neurons within the CNS.
Pretty much. Structurally, most of those motor neurons and interneurons are multipolar. One axon, many dendrites. Very common.
Okay.
But you also find bipolar neurons, one dendrite, one axon, like in your retina, specialized senses, and unipolar, or sometimes called pseudo-unipolar neurons. These have a single short process that splits into 2 long branches, mainly found in sensory ganglia in the PNS.
Okay, different shapes for different roles. Now, if neurons are the stars, they must have a support crew, right? You mentioned that CNS is mostly not neurons.
An enormous support crew. About 90% of the cells in your nervous system are glial cells, or neuroglia. They don't send nerve impulses, but they are absolutely vital.
The unsung heroes.
Definitely. And here's a key clinical point. Because neurons generally don't divide once mature, they're permanent cells, most brain tumors actually arise from these glial cells, which can divide.
Ah, that's a critical insight. Okay, so who are these glial support cells?
Depends if we're in the CNS or PNS. In CNS, brain, and spinal cord, you have astrocytes, star-shaped cells, real multitaskers. Physical support, help transfer nutrients and waste. Their little feet wrap around capillaries and contribute to that blood-brain barrier. Think maintenance and logistics.
Okay, astrocytes.
Then oligodendrocytes. These are the wire wrappers in the CNS. They create the myelin insulation around axons. One oligodendrocyte can myelinate segments of up to maybe 250 different axons. Very efficient.
Wow. Insulators.
Ependymal cells. We mentioned these. They line the ventricles and central canal, producing and circulating the CSF.
Fluid makers.
And microglia. These are the immune cells of the CNS, like tiny macrophages acting as security guards in the cleanup crew, getting rid of debris or invaders.
Okay, that's the CNS crew. What about out in the peripheral nerves, the PNS?
Two main types there. Schwann cells, they also do the wire wrapping, creating myelin. But the key difference is one Schwann cell typically myelinates only one segment of one axon in the PNS. They're also crucial for nerve repair if an axon gets damaged out there.
So different wrappers for CNS and PNS. Oligodendrocytes wrap many, Schwann cells wrap one.
Exactly. And finally, satellite cells. These surround the cell bodies of neurons located in those PNS ganglia, providing physical support, kind of like astrocytes, but in the periphery.
So this huge glial support system is essential. Makes sense. Now, how do the neurons, the axons, actually carry the message? You said electrical impulses.
Right, action potentials. It's an electrical signal, but it's more like a wave, a rapid change in electrical charge that travels down the axon, an all-or-nothing event.
All or nothing.
Yep. When the neuron is just sitting there, it's resting. It has a negative charge inside compared to outside, the resting potential. Around -65 to -70 millivolts, like a coiled spring.
Okay, ready to go.
When it gets enough incoming signals at its dendrites or cell body, and the inside charge reaches a certain threshold level, maybe around -55 millivolts, bam, the action potential fires.
What happens then?
It triggers voltage-gated channels to open. First, sodium ions, Net+, rush into the cell. Loads of positive charge flooding in. This makes the inside briefly positive. That's called depolarization. That's the go signal propagating down the axon.
Inside becomes positive.
Briefly. Then, almost immediately, other channels open and potassium ions, P+, rush out of the cell. Positive charge leaving restores the negative inside. That's repolarization.
Resetting the spring.
Okay, reset. Ready for the next one? Almost. There's a final step. The sodium-potassium pump, an active transporter, works constantly in the background, but especially after an action potential, to pump Na+ back out and K+ back in, fully restoring the original ion balance, getting it perfectly ready for the next signal.
Depolarization, repolarization, pump reset. Wow, okay. And you mentioned insulation helps this, the myelin sheath. How does that speed things up?
Hugely important. Myelin is like the plastic coating on an electrical wire. It's formed by those glial cells, oligodendrocytes, in the CNS, Schwann cells in the PNS, wrapping layers and layers of their fatty membrane around the axon. Lipids are great insulators.
Prevents the electrical signal leaking out.
Exactly. But here's the genius part. The myelin isn't continuous. There are tiny gaps along the axon where it's bare. These are called the nodes of Ranvier.
Nodes of Ranvier, okay.
And these nodes are packed with those voltage-gated sodium channels we just talked about. So instead of the action potential having to regenerate itself slowly all the way down the axon membrane, the electrical current flows passively and rapidly under the myelinated segments, and then the action potential gets regenerated only at the nodes. It essentially jumps from node to node.
Like skipping stones.
Precisely. That's called saltatory conduction. Saltare to leap. It makes nerve impulse transmission dramatically faster, hundreds of times faster in some cases, and more energy efficient too.
That's brilliant, which raises the question, what if that myelin insulation gets damaged?
Yeah, that leads to serious problems. That's the basis of diseases like multiple sclerosis or MS. It's an autoimmune disease where the body's own immune system attacks and destroys the myelin produced by oligodendrocytes in the CNS.
So the signals slow down or stop.
Exactly. Leading to all sorts of neurological problems, muscle weakness, vision problems, coordination issues, fatigue. It really highlights how critical myelin is. Another example is Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is similar but involves an autoimmune attack on myelin in the PNS, often leading to rapid muscle weakness or paralysis.
Wow. So myelin is crucial for speed. But are all nerve fibers the same speed even with myelin?
No, there's variation there too. Speed depends on two main things. Myelination, more is faster, and axon diameter, thicker is faster. Think of it like water flow, wider pipe, faster flow.
Okay, so different classes of fibers.
Yep. We classify them into groups. Group A fibers are the fastest. They're large diameter and heavily myelinated, like fiber optic cables. Speeds up to 120 meters per second.
Whoa, what do they carry?
Things that need speed. Signals to skeletal muscles, sharp, localized pain, specifically A delta fibers, touch, proprioception, knowing where your limbs are.
Makes sense. What else?
Group B fibers are intermediate, lightly myelinated, smaller diameter. Slower than A, maybe 12-30 meters. They include things like preganglionic autonomic fiber signals going to the autonomic ganglia.
Okay, and the slowest.
Group C fibers, these are thin and non-myelinated, so they conduct slowly, maybe 0.5 to 2.3 meters.
What uses such slow fibers?
Things where instant reaction isn't paramount. Diffuse, aching pain, temperature, itch, and importantly, most postganglionic autonomic fibers, the signals going from the ganglia out to the organs. The body prioritizes speed where it's needed most.
Fascinating trade-offs. Okay, so the signal zooms down the axon, maybe jumps along the nodes. It reaches the end, those terminal boutons. How does it cross the gap to the next cell? It can't just jump electrically, can it?
Usually not. That tiny gap between the axon terminal of one neuron and the dendrite or cell body of the next, or a muscle or gland cell, is called the synapse. And most communication across that gap is chemical.
A chemical handshake. How does that work?
When the electrical action potential arrives at the axon terminal, it triggers special voltage-gated calcium channels to open. Calcium ions, Ca2+, rush into the terminal.
Calcium comes in, then what?
That influx of calcium is the signal for tiny sacs called synaptic vesicles, which are sitting there loaded with chemical messenger molecules, neurotransmitters, to move to the edge of the terminal membrane and fuse with it.
They dump their content.
Yeah, exactly. They release the neurotransmitters into the tiny space, the synaptic cleft between the two cells.
The chemical messengers are now in the gap.
Right. They then diffuse across that microscopic gap and bump into specific receptor proteins embedded in the membrane of the next cell, the postsynaptic cell, like a key fitting into a specific lock.
And that unlocks something.
It causes a change in the postsynaptic cell. Depending on the neurotransmitter and the receptor, it might excite the next cell, making it more likely to fire its own action potential, or it might inhibit it, making it less likely to fire. The message is passed chemically.
Okay, so what are some of these chemical keys, these neurotransmitters?
Oh, there are many, but some key ones to know. Acetylcholine, or HE, very common. It's used at the junction between motor neurons and skeletal muscles. It's also heavily used in the autonomic nervous system. All preganglionic fibers release HE, and parasympathetic postganglionic fibers release HE2. We call those fibers cholinergic.
Okay, HE's is big. What else?
Noradrenaline, also called norepinephrine. This is the main neurotransmitter released by most sympathetic postganglionic fibers. So those are called adrenergic fibers. That's your main fight-or-flight chemical signal to organs.
Adrenaline-like.
Dopamine, really important in the brain, involved in movement control, reward pathways, motivation. And here's a crucial link. Parkinson's disease is caused by the death of dopamine-producing neurons in a specific brain area, the substantia nigra. Shows how vital even one neurotransmitter system can be.
Wow. Any others?
Lots. But maybe two more key ones for now. Glutamate. This is the main excitatory neurotransmitter in the CNS. It generally makes neurons more likely to fire.
The go signal.
Pretty much. And glycine, and GABA is another big one, is a major inhibitory neurotransmitter, especially in the spinal cord. It makes neurons less likely to fire.
Stop signal.
Right. And remember, the receptor type matters too. Inavi can bind to nicotinic receptors, like on muscle, or muscarinic receptors, common parasympathetic targets causing different effects. Noradrenaline binds to alpha or beta adrenoreceptors. It's complex.
Keys and locks and different kinds of locks. Okay. So individual neurons are the wires. What about when they bundle together? You mentioned nerves earlier.
Exactly. A nerve is just a bundle containing the axons of many neurons, all traveling together outside the CNS. Think of it like a big telephone cable holding lots of individual lines.
And inside the CNS, like the brain or spinal cord?
Similar bundles exist, but we call them fiber tracks. Same idea, just a different name based on location.
Okay. And do these peripheral nerves, these big cables, have their own layers of protection like the brain did?
They do. Similar concept, different terms. Again, think of that electrical cable analogy.
Lay it on me.
Each individual axon, even if it's myelinated by a Schwann cell, is surrounded by a delicate connective tissue layer called the endoneurium.
Endo, inside, okay.
Then groups of these axons are bundled together into fascicles, and each fascicle is wrapped by a tougher layer called the perineurium.
Peri, around. Got it.
And finally, the entire peripheral nerve, made up of many fascicles plus blood vessels, is encased in a tough outer sheath called the epineurium. Endo, peri, epi. Okay. Layered protection for the cables. Exactly. It provides strength and protection. Which leads us to think about the major nerve routes. Where do these big cables come from?
You mentioned cranial and spinal nerves.
Right. We have 12 pairs of cranial nerves that emerge directly from the brain and brainstem. They mostly handle sensory and motor functions for the head and neck. Think vision, hearing, smell, taste, facial muscles, etc.
12 pairs from the brain.
And then 31 pairs of spinal nerves emerge segmentally from the spinal cord, one pair for each vertebral segment level. These serve the rest of the body, the trunk and limbs.
31 pairs from the spine, and they carry both types of signal.
Most of them are mixed nerves, yes. They contain both sensory axons bringing information in and motor axons sending commands out.
Okay, now here's something fascinating you mentioned. Nerve repair. If you cut a nerve in your arm, can it actually grow back?
In the PNS, yes, there's potential for regeneration, though it's not always perfect. If an axon is severed, the part disconnected from the cell body degenerates. That's called Wallerian degeneration.
The downstream part dies off.
Right. But crucially, the Schwann cells that form the myelin sheath often survive and form a sort of tube or channel where the axon used to be.
Leaving a pathway.
Exactly. And the axon stump on the side, still connected to the cell body, can then sprout new growth cones. These try to grow down that Schwann cell tube, guided by chemical signals, at a rate of maybe 1 to 3 millimeters per day.
Wow, that's slow but amazing.
It is. If it finds its way back to the original target muscle or skin area, function can be restored. But it's a tricky process. It might connect to the wrong place, or scar tissue can block the path. CNS axons, unfortunately, generally don't regenerate nearly as well.
A key difference between PNS and CNS repair.
Got it.
Okay, let's circle back to the autonomic nervous system, the ANS, the automatic pilot. We need to dive a bit deeper into that fight or flight versus rest and digest balance.
Absolutely. The ANS is constantly working behind the scenes, maintaining that internal stability, homeostasis, regulating blood pressure, heart rate, breathing, digestion, body temp, fluid balance. It's crucial.
So let's revisit the sympathetic nervous system, SNS. Fight or flight, where does it originate?
Its nerve fibers emerge from the middle part of the spinal cord, the thoracic and upper lumbar regions. That's T1 down to about L2, hence thoracolumbar origin.
Okay, middle spine, and where they go first.
Often, they synapse very quickly in ganglia that form a chain running right alongside the spinal column. This is the paravertebral chain or sympathetic trunk, allows for a rapid, coordinated response.
Like a set of quick response stations.
Pretty much. And what does it do when activated? Think emergency prep. Increases heart rate, increases blood pressure, sends more blood to your skeletal muscles.
Getting ready to run or fight.
Exactly. Dilates pupils, increases sweating, mobilizes energy stores like glucose, and importantly, it reduces blood flow to non-essential areas for immediate survival, like the digestive tract and skin. It also stimulates the adrenal glands to dump adrenaline and noradrenaline into the bloodstream for an even wider effect.
Okay, and neurotransmitters. You said mostly noradrenaline at the target.
Right. The preganglionic fibers release A shock onto nicotinic receptors in the ganglia, but most postganglionic fibers release noradrenaline onto alpha or beta adrenergic receptors on the target organs. That's the typical sympathetic pathway.
Got it. Now the counter system, parasympathetic nervous system, PNS.
Yeah.
Rest and digest. Where does it come from?
Different origin. It's craniosacral, meaning its nerves arise from the brainstem specifically via certain cranial nerves, 3, 7, 9, and especially X, the vagus nerve, and from the sacral region of the spinal cord, S2, S4.
Top and bottom, skipping the middle.
Right. And the vagus nerve, cranial nerve X, is a huge player here. Vagus means wandering, and it really does. It provides sensory info from many organs, but its parasympathetic motor component supplies the heart, slowing it down, lungs, constricting airways slightly, and most of the digestive tract, stimulating digestion, motility, secretions.
Wow, the vagus nerve is key for rest and digest.
Absolutely. The sacral parasympathetic nerves mainly handle things like emptying the bladder and rectum.
And neurotransmitters here. You said AC all the way.
Pretty much. Preganglionic fibers release AC onto nicotinic receptors in their ganglia, which are often very close to or even inside the target organ. And the postganglionic fibers also release AC, but this time it acts on muscarinic receptors on the target cells. So cholinergic all the way for the parasympathetic output.
Okay, so it's this constant interplay between sympathetic, thoracolumbar, mostly noradrenaline, and parasympathetic, craniosacral ACH, that keeps us balanced. What happens when that balance goes wrong clinically?
Great question. You see it in various conditions. A really common one is vasovagal syncope fainting.
Oh, yeah, people fainting at the sight of blood or standing too long.
Exactly. Often there's a trigger fear, pain, heat, prolonged standing that causes an initial sympathetic surge, but then the parasympathetic system overreacts, overcompensates.
The brakes slam on too hard.
You got it. Massive vasodilation, blood vessels widen, heart rate plummets, bradycardia, blood pressure drops, hypotension, not enough blood gets to the brain, and down you go. It's usually brief and resolves on its own.
An extreme example of the balance tipping. What else?
Raynaud syndrome, or phenomenon. This involves spasms of the small arteries in the fingers and toes, usually triggered by cold or stress. They turn white, then blue, then red, and it can be painful.
And that's an ANS issue.
It's often related to sympathetic overactivity causing excessive vasoconstriction in those digits. In really severe cases, they might even do a peripheral sympathectomy, surgically cutting some sympathetic nerves to the area to reduce the spasms. The accelerator is stuck on, basically.
Wow. So intervening directly in the wiring.
Sometimes necessary. And of course, tons of medications work by targeting the ANS. Think about asthma inhalers like salbutamol, albuterol.
Yeah, helps open the airways.
Right. It's a selective beta-2 adrenergic receptor agonist. It mimics the effect of adrenaline on specific beta-2 receptors found on the smooth muscle of your airways. Activating those receptors causes the muscle to relax, opening the airways bronchodilation. It's directly manipulating the sympathetic pathways effect. So much of pharmacology involves tweaking these autonomic controls.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
Understand this system lets you target interventions.
Exactly.
Wow, what an absolutely incredible journey through the nervous system.
Yeah.
I mean, from the bony armor and fluid cushions right down to the jumping electrical signals and those tiny chemical handshakes. It really is the ultimate command and control network.
It truly is. We've gone from the major divisions, the CNS and PNS, somatic and autonomic, sympathetic and parasympathetic, down to the neurons and their amazing support crew, the glia. We've seen how signals fly down axons using myelin and saltatory conduction, how they cross the synapse using neurotransmitters, how nerves are bundled, and how that automatic pilot, the ANS, keeps everything running, and what happens when the balance shifts. Hopefully you, our listener, feel a bit more equipped now, maybe confident enough to sketch it out for someone else, even that curious 10-year-old.
Yeah, absolutely. So for you, the learner, especially in medicine, what does this all mean? It feels like this is foundational knowledge for almost everything else, right?
It absolutely is the bedrock. As you go forward, almost every disease state, every patient presentation, every drug you learn about, you'll be able to trace the mechanisms back to these fundamental principles of how the nervous system is built and how it communicates.
It gets to everything.
Everything. And maybe one final thought to leave you with, connecting this to the bigger picture. We've talked about this incredibly complex self-regulating system. Billions of neurons, trillions upon trillions of connections, wiring that shapes our movements, our senses, our automatic functions. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How much of what we think of as our personality, our memories, consciousness itself resides purely within this intricate biological wiring? And as our understanding gets deeper, how might that change our definition of what it even means to be human? Something to definitely ponder on your next deep dive.